Hey, welcome back to Tenacity, the podcast where we explore the forgotten skills that can ensure our survival and self-sufficiency. I'm Dr. Bradley Garrett, your host and guide on this journey, and in today's episode, we're delving into the art of baking, a timeless skill that has sustained us for millennia. Humanity began baking bread in the cradle of civilization, ancient Egypt, around 2600 BCE, using just 3 ingredients: flour, water, and yeast. And what the Egyptians put on that bread was honey, some of which was recently excavated by archaeologists and was still edible, proving that some things never go out of style. Tenacity. The things we do to survive. If you stockpile flour, water, yeast, and honey, you can literally live on that stuff for years. Now, rather than just talking about bread making, I want to walk you through the basics of what bread is. So first, let's understand the difference between leavened and unleavened bread. Leavened bread, like your classic sandwich loaf or baguette, gets its airy texture from yeast or other leavening agents. Those early Egyptians made their yeast by combining flour and water and leaving it in the sun to ferment. On the other hand, unleavened bread, flatbreads like pita, tortillas, roti, or chapati, don't use rising agents. One unleavened survival food that stands the test of time is Scandinavian hardtack. This is really dense, durable bread, and it has a history that dates back centuries. Sailors, soldiers, and explorers relied on it when they needed a long-lasting source of sustenance. And you only need 3 ingredients to make this. It turns out to be something between a bread and a cracker, and it's pretty good. I spent a lot of time in Sweden a while back, and I ate a ton of this stuff. They call it knäckebröd there, or crisp bread, and often it's eaten with elderberry or cloudberry jam, which a lot of people also make from scratch. It turns out that when you live in 8 months of winter with 6 months of darkness, you're highly motivated to figure this stuff out. So hardtack is great for your bunker, but your family is going to be really unhappy if they can't have fluffy leavened bread. So here we go. Let's get into the art of baking the perfect sourdough loaf using just 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, and a sourdough starter. A sourdough starter is a natural fermentation culture that replaces commercial yeast. It's a living, breathing mixture of flour and water teeming with wild yeast and lactobacilli bacteria, which are great for the gut. I got my sourdough starter from a neighbor 3 years ago, and I've kept it alive by very creepily feeding it flour and water weekly since then. It's like a pet that lives in the fridge now. And older starters generally are better because they fermented for a long time, so they've got a lot of that natural bacteria built up in them. But you can also create your own starter. All you need to do is combine equal parts flour and water in a jar and let it sit for several days, feeding it with more flour and water each day until it's bubbly and active. And once your starter is ready, you can use it to make delicious, crusty sourdough bread. So I've got 1 2/3 cup of room temperature water. I'm gonna grab a 1/4 cup of my starter and dump it in there. And then we're gonna whisk it together until the starter dissolves into the water. Now we're gonna let that sit, and that's gonna let the yeast go to work with the water, and it's gonna start bubbling pretty soon. Next, we're gonna add roughly 4 1/4 cups of bread flour, 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, and then we're gonna mix it all together with a wooden spoon to get it into a nice shaggy dough. And once you've got everything mixed together, all you need to do is cover it with a damp towel and let it sit for 30 minutes so that dough can rise. You gotta let that yeast go to work. So once your dough is risen for about 30 minutes, we've got a really nice dough here that we can work with. And what we're gonna do is stretch this out like you would do with a pizza dough. Stretch it out and then fold it into quarters to add some air pockets into it. Then return it to the bowl and let it rise overnight. The next morning, preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, flour and slice the top of the bread and bake it for 50 minutes. So here's one I prepared earlier. It's beautiful, crusty, brown sourdough bread, mission complete. That's all there is to it. If you've got 5 gallons of flour, 50 gallons of water, and a nice stockpile of salt, you're literally fed for weeks for a negligible amount of cash. And if you don't have access to a standard oven, you can bake this same bread in a cob earth oven. That concludes this week's episode of Tenacity. I'm Dr. Bradley Garrett, reminding you that survival food can actually taste pretty good. Stay tuned for more episodes where we pull back the curtain on stuff that's supposed to be complicated, but turns out to be easy and second nature. Until next time, stay sharp and stay safe.